Welcome to video number 3, Hope for a Better Marriage. By now, you hopefully have watched the first 2 videos and you've had a chance to maybe practice with some of these tools where we're talking about building a better culture by having better conversations, by having better conflict. And what's really neat about this video is it brings it all together. It's a culmination of all these ideas. I want to use a term that I haven't used yet. It's called low-lying fruit, and you may be familiar with it. But the idea is that when you want to practice a new skill, you want to practice it in the easy places first so that more difficult places come a little bit better for you down the road. So when it comes to low-lying fruit, when you're sitting down and having a couch time, or you're just interacting, doing some quick check-ins, or maybe you're utilizing a circle back or a TAP presentation when you're coming into using those tools. Select conversations and real issues, but not major issues. I tell couples there's 4 things that if you talk about these 4 things, they're probably the hardest things you'll discuss: faith, family, finances, and intimacy. And so those are probably not the places to start when you're trying to build a better culture and have better conversations and have better conflict. So use low-lying fruit, easier, non-conflict oriented types conversations to be able to utilize these things. And when you do that, you're going to be able to build something that works better for you. The reality is, whether you're in crisis, conflict, or transition, if you're not careful, what you're really in is a negative communication cycle. And what happens is when we get into a negative communication cycle, first of all, we don't know that we're in it. And then when we figure out that we're in it, we try to get out of it, but sometimes it makes it worse because the very efforts that we're using to get out is the very thing we shouldn't be doing. And so let me give some examples. Some people try to get out of a negative communication style with addictions, chronic conflict, threats of divorce, emotional distance, infidelity, just not communicating. I mean, these are ways, believe it or not, these are ways people actually are using these things to try to get out of a negative communication cycle. So I want to share this picture with you, and I've got a board here to visually show it to you, and we'll put this on the screen as well. But there are 4 parts to this tool, all right? You can see that on the left side you have OC, old cycle. On the right side, NC means new cycle. And then connecting the 2 is RB, what I call the rickety bridge. I'll describe that more in a minute. And then at the top, TM, is a trigger moment. Now, if you just have this model in your mind, this is how you build a better culture. This is how you have better conversations. This is how you have better conflict. Everything we've been talking about comes to this. Now, let me unpack these for you just a little bit and try to help you understand more of why these things are important. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about the old cycle first. The old cycle is basically that which is no longer working for us. And usually it comes out in this way: this isn't working, or we're not communicating, or I don't know what to do, or I can't keep doing this. I mean, we use all these phrases that basically means the way we've been going here, even the things that we've been doing to try to get out of this, it's actually making things a little bit worse. And so the old cycle is something that you can actually label once you've realized that it's not serving you anymore. Now, as soon as you start calling it that, essentially what you've done is you've stepped onto the rickety bridge. The rickety bridge is, the analogy I like to use here is like those old movies where they come to the side of a mountain and they're standing between this mountain and that mountain, and there's this bridge that's been there for like 100 years and it's got wooden slats. I always wondered, who built that thing, But you think, oh, I know what they're going to do. They're going to get out there on this little bridge and they're going to try to cross to the other side, and invariably somebody almost falls or does fall. I think in one of the King Kong movies, the whole thing came down and they got tangled up with other monsters. I mean, that's what it's like sometimes. As soon as you step onto the rickety bridge, you can look back at the old cycle and realize that that's not helping us anymore, but you can't stay there. It's not designed to be there forever. All right, now, the new cycle. The new cycle is very much what it describes. It's us building something fresh, something better, something we haven't done before, which means that all of the efforts that we've tried to use to get out of the old cycle, we can't rely on those things. We have to have some new stuff, hence these tools that we've been sharing in these videos. So you use these tools and you will get to that new cycle. All right, now I want to make a couple other comments about this. The rickety bridge is something that you have to be very careful about. You don't want to stay there forever, because the longer you stay there, the more treacherous it becomes. In other words, it's the in-between state. It's that place where things feel awkward. I mean, awkwardness isn't bad, by the way. Awkwardness means that you're just changing, that things are different. But you don't want to stay there forever, because you want to be able to go to the place where you're actually going to be able to have productive conflict. Now, trigger moments is important because it's that emotional charge that often takes us into the past where we already have been. So if you're going to build a better culture, I want you to keep these 4 laws in mind as we look at these 4 components. All right, number 1, as soon as you begin to call the old cycle an old cycle, you actually step onto the rickety bridge. All right, so labeling it is the key. We want to label problems, not people. I'll get into that a little more later. But when you're calling these things by name, what you're acknowledging is we've stepped into a new place, an awkward place, and if we stay here a long time, it can be a little treacherous, but we've already taken the first step by calling the old cycle something that's not working. Number 2, the rickety bridge is awkward and therefore not designed to be a permanent location. So while we're on this bridge moving towards something new, it's going to feel a little bit awkward. It's going to be a little different and sometimes difficult. But we recognize that that's part of the process, so we're not going to hit the panic button because it doesn't feel right. Now, this last one is very important. Only give trigger moments the respect that they deserve. A moment, a conversation, a circle back. So when you've had a conflict and it's because somebody got triggered, something said or done or a presentation wasn't quite right or whatever, something triggered you. The temptation in this moment, stay with me here, the temptation is for you to go, oh my gosh, here we go again, we're right back to the beginning, we haven't learned anything, we haven't gotten anywhere, and people tell me this stuff all the time, and that's not true. Do not allow a trigger moment to define your relationship. It only gets to define that moment. So you go back, you have a circle back conversation, you say, what in the world happened? Where did we go wrong? Remember? So when you ask the questions to define the moment, you're not giving it any more power than it deserves, and that's very important. All right. I need to give you some practical suggestions as you use some of these tools that we've talked about. All right, number 1, use couch time to practice check-ins. Now think about that. First of all, if you know what I said right there and you don't have to go back to your notes, then you see what you've already done. You're developing a singular vocabulary. Many times the reason why couples stay in conflict is because they don't say the same words and mean the same thing. And so when you use a couch time, that very protected, proactive, positive session that you've carved out twice a week to sit down and talk, and you discuss low-lying fruit issues in the form of a check-in, asking how you think I'm doing, how you think you're doing, how you think we're doing. And when you ask those questions, what you've done is you're using a singular vocabulary and you're practicing proactive tools that's already putting you into a new cycle. Just having that conversation puts you into a new cycle. All right, number 2, use check-ins to avoid reactive conflict. So a check-in doesn't even have to be in a couch time. It can. A check-in can be on the way out the door. Hey, I just wanted to tell you something, honey. You have been amazing lately at just being there for me, and I just wanted to tell you thank you. And you kiss your spouse and you leave. That was like, what, 10 seconds? You can do a check-in anytime. If you're going to text, no conflict in texting, but if you're going to send a text, I am so excited about the way our conversation went last night during couch time. I just want you to know that that is getting so much better. You see what I did? All I did was took a few seconds and send a text to let my spouse know that what we're doing right now is helping. So use check-ins to avoid reactive conflict. Number 3, use a circle back to process a trigger moment. Wow. See how easy this sounds? If you practice this over and over again, it actually starts to become easy. When you use a circle back, the trigger moment, let me show you this chart again. The trigger moment is almost like it's threatening you when I first showed this to you. But if you look at it as an opportunity for a circle back, now all of a sudden, it's a different tool. It's like, oh, we had a trigger back. Oh, good, we get to have a couch time. We get to have a circle back conversation. So when you use a tool in that way, you automatically begin to frame your mind around positive communication. It becomes the culture of your relationship. Okay. Use trigger moments as an opportunity to reflect upon your old cycle of communication. That's number 4. Use trigger moments as an opportunity to reflect upon your old cycle of communication. So if you have a trigger moment, sit down and have a conversation and say, you know, we haven't had that in a couple of weeks now. We have had less trigger moments over the last month than we've had over the last year. It's almost like, have you ever moved into a house and then you reflect back on a house that you used to live in that had all these issues? Maybe there was some fondness associated with it as well. But how much fun is it to reflect back on a season in your life or a house that you used to live in that had all these problems because you don't have them now? How much fun would it be to sit down and have a conversation and say, wow, we're not struggling with that anymore. That's no longer an issue for us. Or as bad as that was this weekend, do you know that hasn't happened in a year? Couples do that in my office all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, we haven't had a conflict in 6 months. And it's a very exciting thing for them to discover. All right, number 5. I told you I'd come back to this. This is maybe one of the most important things that we'll share here. Learn to label problems, not people. I know I'm a clinician, and as a clinician, there are diagnostic labels to define behaviors. The problem with labels is that they actually limit people. I do not like labeling in any capacity. I'm not a fan of diagnostic labels, except that it's a tool for understanding behavior. I despise labels that put control measures on a human being, because that's not the way things should be. And I think when we're trying to label something, we should be very careful to label the issue or the mindset or the presentation or the tone or the approach or the attitude or the behavior. I mean, your behavior is not you. Your attitude is not you. And when we do this for one another in a relationship and we train each other to label the problem instead of the person, all of a sudden we find that we are in much less conflict than we have ever been before, because we're not in the old cycle. We're not even on the rickety bridge now. Now we're in the new cycle, and we're reflecting back on the day that we don't ever want to go back to. All right, here's some helpful check-ins, and then we'll do some wrap-up. Just some examples. Here's a we check-in. I think we're getting better at using circle backs to process trigger moments. Give credit where credit's due. If it's true, say it. Here's another one. Here's a good check-in, a you check-in. You have been consistent lately about taking initiative with couch time. I don't care if they've only done it twice in the last 2 weeks. It's still true. You've been consistent with taking initiative. Here's an I check-in. I've been trying to watch my texting when we're at odds lately, and I'm trying to be more proactive about being face-to-face with you. Have you noticed? Do you remember the rule with an I check-in? The rule was, be nice. So if I put my heart out there and ask you if you've noticed something, be nice and give credit where credit is due. All right. So I really want to encourage you to do something different here. You may want to go back and rewatch these videos, because I threw a lot of content in your direction for you to process. And it's certainly okay for you to go back and look at them again, go through your PDF workbook, see what questions you may have that you didn't ask. I really want to encourage you to email me and ask me anything you want to ask me. And if there's another level of support that's needed here, we can certainly talk about that. So check out other resources at skillsofengagement.com. There'll be other content there. We'll continue to add new content, more video series to be able to meet your needs. And I do want to encourage you to continue to invest in your marriage so that you can build a better culture. All of these tools actually work if you do the work. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for your investment. And my heart is to help you and for us all to enjoy happy marriage.